Welcome to another episode of Ecosystem TV. I'm very excited to have Chetan Krishnamurthy, the CMO of IBM APAC, here with me today. Chetan, I have been watching you interview some very interesting people on your Reinvent and Refresh Talk series, and I'm really glad to have you on the other side of the table here today.
Great. No, thank you, Sash. It's good to see you, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. Really appreciate it. Look forward to this.
So, really, we could be talking about many things today, but we are focusing more on a recently published Ecosystem Bites in partnership with IBM, where we spoke about how organizations can shape their change strategy. And there is an urgent need for that, right? Because organizations have reinvented themselves in numerous ways over the last 3 years now. And now they look around them and they actually find that change is the new constant. And every successful organization has actually gone through the same rate of transformation. Now, one of the biggest challenges of this need for constant transformation is that resources are, in the end, finite. And of course, skills shortage is also a reality. So, how do organizations continue to change at pace with all these different, sometimes conflicting priorities like customer excellence, operational efficiency, employee retention, etc.? How do they prioritize all of that?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think it's a wonderful topic and question, Sash. I think, look, the one thing I think we all need to acknowledge is that change is constant, right? I think we've talked a lot about how the pandemic has accelerated a lot of things, including the move to digital transformation, new customer experiences, and so on, right? So if I look at it from the way I see it, I don't necessarily see some of the things that you mentioned as potentially conflicting priorities, right? Because if you're doing really good CX, you're actually able to really kind of fine tune your processes to support that CX. And in many ways, you obviously get your employees and your stakeholders lined up to delivering that CX. So there's a purpose, there's a vision, and there's a mission, right? But that said, like you rightly said, there is a finite amount of capacity, right? There's a finite amount of capacity. The question is, how do you take what you have and invest it in the areas that actually make sense to deliver the best possible client experience for the clients of the organizations, right? That's the fundamental premise, as you rightly said. Now, I look at it this from two or three levers, right? So number one, I think, is how do you tap in to that network of skills, not just necessarily within your organization, but also outside, right? This is where I think the power of partnerships, the power of ecosystem comes into the picture, right? Like, how do you work collaboratively within a broad ecosystem, figure out that go to market so you can actually deliver best for your clients, right? That's definitely, I think, one area. This obviously means being able to embrace the partnership from the get-go, and being transparent, working together, and actually skilling together so that you can actually drive this in one direction. That's, I think, is number one, right? So it all comes down to the power of ecosystems. And the second one, I think, which is very important, I think, is when you build some of these experiences ground up, whether you're doing this incrementally in some cases, the key, I think, is the platform, right? The platform that you're actually using in many ways to actually deliver this customer experience or improve operational efficiency in many ways, or deliver the right kind of business models, right? The second thing, I think, becomes the platform. And if the platform is truly open in nature, I think then you also start getting what you call kind of a force multiplier effect, because you start drawing power from variety of innovations that are available on a single platform. You end up building a lot of cross-functional harmony, cross-industry value in many cases, and that again kind of ladders up on the ecosystem and the skills piece that you can actually draw from a wider network, right? That, I think, is the second one. And the third one, I think, it comes down to, I think, a lot of skilling, a lot of continuous learning within the organization, right? Because technology is shifting rapidly, frameworks are shifting rapidly. The question then becomes, how do you install the right kind of skilling, within the organizations so that, people continue to learn continuously and actually fine tune, how some of these systems are developed and deployed.
That was a wonderfully detailed response, Chetan. I really like that. So we talk a lot. One of the things that you did not really mention, but you did mention in part, is we talk a lot about technical debt today,
Yeah.
right? And Organizations have spent in areas that have helped them survive, and then they've ignored some other areas which, are sometimes mission critical. And we mentioned in the BI that it is not only technical debt that organizations see today. It's way more, There have been processes that have not been changed. There have been data that has not been identified, let alone harnessed. Did you see that in your clients in the Asia Pacific region or elsewhere as well?
Yeah, again, I think what you just said, Sash, I think is a very, very important imperative if you want to accelerate digital transformation at speed, right? And I think this is something that a lot of the clients today are grappling, working towards getting better at, because I think this forms the basis or the foundation for how you can actually build new business models, like as we spoke about, right? And the concept of technical debt, I think to me is also very, very personal in some ways, because I was an R&D guy for a very long time. And I have seen, the effort that it sometimes requires to actually do refactoring versus building, newer and newer applications, right? And you end up accumulating a lot of technical debt along the way. But what you're saying is even broader, right? Which is much, much broader than just, a software alone. And I think all of this, I think, Sash, it kind of starts off with a mindset in terms of how do you look at this in a very incremental and iterative fashion, right? This also ends up being the kind of methods that you actually use to design some of your systems, right? So there is obviously a lot of prevalence in terms of a garage methodology where you actually start doing POCs initially, then you build minimum viable products, and eventually over time scale. Now, as you scale, it's very important that some of these systems that have been built in a POC environment actually are then taken along into the new architectures, as you said, into the new data models, as you said, as these applications and solutions are actually scaled across the enterprise, right? And this again requires very, very clear notion of the kind of methods that you're using, the kind of, I would say, the processes that you're using within the organization to scale, so that you're consciously taking a look at some of these foundational blocks, and they are evolving with business models, with the scale that you're building for your organization in terms of reach and customer experience and so on, right? I think this is pretty much, I think, where it starts, right? It's the kind of methodology that you use. And it also then again goes back to the skilling part that we spoke about, right? Like, how do you kind of make sure that the organization is skilled and is aware that these kind of debts in the long run can be challenging? And it's very important to start designing this as you continue to build, some of these, applications, Sash. I think what organizations can do, I think, is the right kind of methodologies. Again, the right kind of platform or framework that you use that is very modular in nature, where you can actually incrementally build, but a platform that also gives you the flexibility to plug into what you already had within the organization, while you continue to drive some of your new innovation, so that you can take this along, so that it's ready for scale and it can fit, evolving business models as you go along.
You make a very interesting point, especially towards the beginning of the answer, when you spoke about, how change management is often a very long-term initiative,
Yeah.
right? It's reiterative, it continues on for a while. But organizations also need short-term wins, yeah? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where you have the short-term ROIs and the long-term ROIs. And it is almost as if organizations have to have a two-speed track to change. So how complex does this, dual track make things?
Yeah, and I think the notion of a two-speed IT again has been a very prevalent concept, right? Because you have one gear pretty much working at clockwork speed in terms of agile methodologies, iterative deployments, test on the fly, deploy, scale, and so on. But there's also a foundational piece that actually gives you that stability, the access to mission critical infrastructure and applications in some ways, right? So it's very important that both of them are obviously clearly balanced, right? So this again, I think, to me, comes down to a platform that is first of all built on an open technology, right? Embracing a true openness. So if you do that, because of the way these platforms are actually built in terms of enterprise security, in terms of being able to handle mission critical applications, drive those workloads at one side, but on the other hand, it gives you access to new age tools, new age platforms, new age way of working, right? So it acts as a classic bridge between how fast Your customers are demanding to go and get you that experience in terms of new applications and new innovations, while making sure that the business that's actually running is secure, it's robust, and it's trustworthy, right? And if you look at the way I think we as IBM have actually concepted our entire strategy, I think it's essentially for us built on OpenShift as our foundational platform. But on top of that, we have obviously layered, solutions for data and AI that can actually help you draw analytics and get insights from data. Obviously, platforms on automation that can actually help you, shift to higher value in terms of work, right? And then at the same time, be sustainable as an organization while keeping all of this secure, right? It gives you that ability to move fast, rapidly innovate, rapidly prototype, while also giving you access to some of these mission critical infrastructure that you can manage on-prem, on the edge, on public cloud, so that you have that flexibility while you're focused more on innovating and creating your applications. That's how I look at it.
Cool. And you spoke about reiterative reinvention. And of course, in today's world, it's completely backed by technology. But you've also been talking about mindset, and that mindset is almost always led by an organization's culture. How do leadership teams infuse this culture of change in organizations, Chetan?
Yeah, I think the first thing I think it starts, Sash, is first of all embracing, I would say, diversity within the organization, right? So you have to embrace diversity, and you have to encourage diversity in terms of thinking, right? So once you start that, I think you've already created a culture of inclusiveness, and you've created a culture where contributions from various different perspectives are already appreciated, right? That is, I think, one of the critical pieces, I think, right? And regardless of where you are, regardless of whether you're an ecosystem partner, whether you're working with an open community within the organization, you've already started creating that circle of trust and removing all of these disconnected bubbles, if you will, that might potentially exist within and across the organization, right? That's, I think, is the first part, right? And the second piece, I think, is leading by example, right? Because as a leadership, if you're leading by example in terms of the way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you look at fundamentally designing some of these solutions, the way you look at your challenges of your clients in terms of a very empathetic lens, right? Using the right kind of approaches. If you start with that, if you embrace this diverse way of thinking and working, and you actually break down those silos between the teams, and then have a culture of continuous feedback to actually foster incremental improvements, I think it eventually lends to growth in terms of skills. It eventually lends to employees wanting to be more engaged and being there, learning from each other. And eventually all of this, I think, lends to better solutions, stronger platforms, and greater customer experience, for the clients, right? And again, the basis for a lot of these things, along with the, some of these decisions, is the platform that you make a choice on. If the platform is flexible enough for you to bring all these mindset, be able to realize this in practice, tap into the best of open technologies, better proprietary technologies, have you that flexibility, I think you can create a culture that's actually world-class in terms of innovating and in terms of delivering the best possible digital experiences for the clients, Sash. I think that's the fundamental premise, right? I think, as you rightly said in the beginning, how do you get the best CX? How do you keep employees engaged? How do you keep us all secure while you actually continue to deliver value for our, for our base, right? That's the fundamental premise, I think, for all of us. I think if you start with these three things and make the right decisions on technology and platforms, I think it can give you that flexibility to be able to innovate and, I think, establish a truly winning culture, right? Not just for today, but also for, years to come, Sash. That's how I look at it.
Chetan, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time today and for sharing your insights with us. I'm sure organizations looking to succeed in 2023 and beyond will find a lot of value in what you shared.
No, thank you, Sash. It was great talking to you. I think we covered so many diverse perspectives. Always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for having me here.
Do read the Ecosystem Bite to find out more about the 5 ways to shape your change strategy to be prepared for a world that requires constant reinvention.